What role do you think that the rest of the telecom infrastructure ecosystem can play in mitigating the congestion that we've been hearing about between the content and the last mile? Is there anything that the rest of us can do to improve that situation, or is that really a problem that's an artificial situation being created?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting, as you mentioned, the connection between the CDNs and the origins and the optimization of where the bandwidth is coming from. And so as the pipes get full, how that data gets moved and at what speed do the telecom infrastructure, at what speed does the telecom infrastructure increase to meet demands of the growing data, as well as it then ultimately getting moved down to the consumer. It'll be interesting to see how that actually plays out. Where does the growth actually happen, at the CDN level, at the edge, delivering it to the customer, or in the connections of the backbone between the big hubs?
I think what you're seeing as the amount of data that's being generated, you mentioned 90% in the past couple of years, as the amount of data explodes, what you're seeing is a stress fracturing of the traditional ecosystem, between tier one providers and content and last mile broadband. And what it's really kind of highlighting is that up until now, nobody's really given a whole lot of credit to the value of the underlying network. And so if you look at the different voices that are in the marketplace out there, they're basically saying, hey, this network has a cost. It requires an ongoing investment. And I think the good news for a lot of network service providers is that the value of the network is becoming back into the discussion, whereas in the past it's always kind of been assumed, oh, that's the internet, it's free. And I think what we're also starting to see is that there's been an entrenched buildup that is starting to get exposed to people protecting their own self-interest in a way that's harmful to the consumer. So regardless of which side you're on in terms of broadband or content, you're also seeing that, and middleman, if you will, you're starting to see that all three parties are behaving in ways that weren't necessarily with the best interest of the consumer in mind. And so as a manifestation of this, you're starting to see a new business model emerge where the consumer has a little bit more control. That all of the parties have to play fairly, and they have to find a new business relationship between them that really kind of accomplishes what the consumer's looking to do, which is be able to watch, Game of Thrones at 10 o'clock without the screen doing this, So that's kind of the goal, and I think all the parties have to kind of figure a different way to make that happen.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, and also we have with CDNs, as much as they help with the transport of the data to the end user, they do introduce additional complexities and additional parties involved in the transfer of this data. So you get a lot of, you get the potential at least for shifting of blame and who's really responsible for this choke point or that choke point. And it may not matter to the eyeballs, as you say, the people who are trying to watch their shows, but certainly from the service provider perspective, you want to make sure that up to the point that you can control, you have the service level you require, and using CDNs can help, but they can also hinder in some cases where you don't have control past that point. So it does make things a bit more complex.
Yeah, and I think if we were to take it into like our everyday environment and look at the way you experience TV or consume that kind of digital information, now you have the option of the Go, abc.go, hbo.go, and all these different things where you can watch things live as they're happening through the traditional TV stream. You can also follow up on your iPad or your computer. The other day I just watched the games of World Cup on my tablet and everything. So while doing that, you tend to forget the ISP as you're consuming that experience. You're looking at who is serving that content to you. If it's slow, if it's bad, I'm thinking, oh, ESPN is crap. I need to find some other place. I'll just go watch it on the screen. If ABC is bad, I'm not going to watch ABC shows online anymore. I'm just going to watch it on the TV, and then I'll watch, CBS online instead, because that gives me a better quality of experience. So at that point, you begin to see that there is a solid push for the content providers to drive some of that conversation around the quality of experience to that end user. And we can begin to see certain models emerging from things like this, what Netflix is doing with Comcast and the likes of Verizon, and striking up those direct deals with these telecom operators to say, get me deeper cached into that network. Let's put our devices there and let's do some of those things that ensure that quality of experience at the end of the customer. Because at the end of the day, it's you're consuming a soccer match that ESPN is giving to you. You're consuming Game of Thrones that HBO is providing to you. And at that point, the telecom operators get a little bit of a pass on there. And what you see on the other side of it is that the telecom operators begin to take a lot of strategic steps to take advantage of that market. It's been said many times that it's dumb pipes and things like that. So they're looking at how they can commercialize and take advantage of that easily. They have the cost advantage of that traditional underlying network. How about going a little bit up the stack by either investing in their own CDN infrastructure or partnering, like Shawn pointed out before, to make sure their customer get a holistic solution and a holistic experience, both from a content provider source and from the end user consuming those services.
If I could just add one more piece to that, I think the one of the things that's interesting is that the debate seems to always center around, well, whose fault was it? Was it the network operator? Was it the content operator? Was it the peering connection in between? And I think one of the things that we're seeing is that the idea that networks are resilient to the point that they never fail is turning out to be untrue. They're in a constant, there's no good time to do a maintenance window anymore. And then you compound that with, you've got a whole series of actors in the process of getting video to the consumer, that there's a lot of points of failure. There's points of failure in the software, there's points of failure in the underlying server infrastructure. We've seen numerous articles where, things like the Oscars, oh, that was a network failure. Turns out, when you back that up and look at the root cause, it was actually they didn't have enough capacity in their cloud service provider. It wasn't the cloud service provider's fault, they just didn't provision enough excess capacity to handle that kind of an event. So I think what you're starting to see is this enigma in terms of where is the ultimate root cause. And I think that comes back to, as a network service provider, you can't just offer the underlying basic service. You have to have visibility into all the different layers that are in between the content to the eyeball. And I think that's kind of where CDN comes back in and plays a role, is it allows the network operator to be able to see and where in the ecosystem are things starting to fail. And then you can provide both the consumer but also the content owner and others a better visibility into where the problem is and how to address it.